Hey guys, I want to talk about abdominal separation. And before you stop this video and say, this does not apply to me, just hear me out because I think this applies to more people than realize it, and especially to women. It tends to be something that happens after childbirth because the abdominals spread and then they're supposed to heal back together, but it doesn't always happen as it should. And not only that, but women's just anatomy makes it more likely to happen for women. So really quickly, the reason why I have abdominal separation is that I had surgery and I had some pretty severe things happen during the surgery. It was supposed to be a minor procedure. They ended up opening me up really wide, so I have a big scar that goes diagonally across my rectus abdominis. The right side was completely cut through, and then the scar goes across the bottom. So, and that's where it actually was cut through at the bottom. But then the other thing that happened is I have a hernia. So it's all connected, and I will have to get it repaired someday. But essentially, because of the way that the scar healed and then the weakness in the muscles because of the hernia, my rectus abdominis on the right pulled to the side, and there's a gap between the muscles. So I'm not saying I know absolutely everything about this, but I've been reading and learning and practicing a lot of things as I've been learning more about what's going on. And I believe that in my case, the bottom part of the muscle is actually stuck in my scar, so that even more prevented it from moving like it should, contracting and expanding. And I just mention all this because there might be other people who have something similar, so I wanted to tell you kind of how I understand my situation. But now let me get to what you can do about it. So first of all, I'll tell you that I used to always stand like this, hips forward, and you can see right away, or you could understand very easily how this is putting a lot of strain on the front of my body, and the back of my body is getting really short. Back is shortening, front is lengthening. And so that's number one. And a long time ago, through practicing yoga, I started to observe and wonder, why am I always standing like this? And I slowly learned to come back into alignment. Now, if you just try this out, see if this feels familiar to you. And then when you bring your hips back over your ankles so the spine can lengthen, I think you can feel that the core just right away becomes more engaged. The other thing that happens, like I said, the back body is shortening, and you can probably feel your low back crunching when you thrust the pelvis forward this way. When you draw it back, see if you can feel the lower back elongate as the core engages. So if you are someone who stands this way, it can take a long time to break that habit, but it's absolutely worth it because your muscles will be more evenly engaged. You'll be able to engage your core just in activities of daily life. Now, when we're exercising, even if you started to correct that habit, those old habits can come back out because you're not paying as much attention. You don't have quite as much control over your body when you're doing unfamiliar movements. So it's really, this can come into play in just about any type of movement. Think about a lunge. It's pretty easy to get the low back, like too much of a curve, and really compressing and thrusting again forward into the abdomen, or like dumping forward into the abdomen. Instead, I can draw my abdomen back by activating my core and tucking my tailbone so that lengthens the spine and activates the core. It's also a hip flexor stretch, which is why sometimes we avoid that movement because it can be kind of an intense stretch. But tight hip flexors make this problem that I'm describing worse. So as much as you can get in and stretch those hip flexors, try and do that. All right, squats, also a very common exercise move. Look at how I'm dumping my pelvis forward into my abdomen before I even bend down. Okay, I used to do this all the time. Just look at, kind of how my belly looks. Now compare it to this. So I'll show you with my hands on my hips. I'm tucking the tailbone, tilting the pelvis, So I'm drawing up on my pubic bone, tucking the tailbone to tilt the pelvis. It's a backward tilt, posterior tilt. So this is anterior, this is posterior tilt. And then it's hard to go as low in the lunge, but I can feel that my core is a lot more engaged. So, sorry, squat, not lunge. So then just gradually, it has to do with openness in the groins too, but you start working to go lower with that integrity of your core. And now, last thing, I want to show you on lying down. All right. So, actually, we'll do one more after this. But lying down. Now notice, I can do the exact same thing lying down. My low back is coming up away from the floor really strongly, arching the low back. Not good. So, especially if you're holding weights and you are taking your arms back overhead like this, it's really, really important to engage the core. And it's that same posterior tilt of the pelvis, tucking the tailbone toward the knees, lifting the pubic bone up toward the head, and drawing the abdomen back. And now I can feel my whole low back in contact with the floor. So I'm no longer thrusting my ribs up away from the floor, but I'm drawing my lower ribs back, and I keep that as I take my arms back overhead. So that's really important. Anytime you are on your back, feel the whole low back in contact with the floor. You know, there might be part of it that feels a little bit light on the floor, and then certain parts of it that feel heavier, but it should be drawing back toward the floor at the very least. Don't let it puff up away from the floor. All right, so same concept. Now, let's look at that in a standing move. So anytime you have weights in your hands, you inherently have a little less control, or you have to focus more on really controlling your core, because that's part of the point of the move. You're challenging your muscles to be able to control the movement. That's how they get stronger. So if I'm lifting my arms overhead, again, especially if I'm used to this, it's really easy to just thrust those ribs forward. But no, I have to keep those bottom ribs drawing back as I take my arms overhead. So it's a shortening of the front body so that the back body can still lengthen. I hope that makes sense. If you have questions, comment below and I'll do my best to answer.